Why do some musicians just blow up? I mean, become these global superstars, while other artists who are maybe just as talented never quite get there? We usually just chalk it up to luck or maybe raw talent. But what if there's a predictable science behind who makes it big? Think back to the mid-2010s for a second. Artists like Lil Peep, Juice WRLD, and XXXTENTACION just exploded onto the scene. It felt like they came out of nowhere. No big record label, no industry machine behind them, and yet they were dominating the charts before they were even old enough to legally drink. So how on earth did that happen? Well, a really fascinating new study in what's called the Science of Culture suggests it isn't just a random fluke. It points to a very specific, measurable reason that might explain these incredible, meteoric rises to fame. Okay, so to really get this new theory, we've got to look at the classic debate first. What actually drives success in music and art? For years, there have basically been two main schools of thought. On one side, you have people who say success is just a lottery ticket. It's pure luck, and then a rich-get-richer effect takes over. On the other side, people argue it's a meritocracy. The best, highest quality stuff just naturally rises to the top. But the truth, as it turns out, might be a third option that kind of combines them both. And that brings us to that third option. It's this really powerful idea that's actually borrowed from the world of economics. It's called the first mover advantage. And in simple terms, it just means that whoever gets into a new market first gets a massive, massive head start that later competitors really struggle to overcome. The study gives the perfect example to help you wrap your head around this: the iPhone. Right? Apple didn't just make another phone. They basically created a whole new category. And by being the first mover, they set the standard and they've pretty much dominated ever since. So how does this whole thing work in music? Well, it all starts when an artist does something truly new. They innovate a new sound. For a little while, they're the only one doing that thing. They essentially have a monopoly on that style. And because it's so fresh and different, we perceive it as being higher quality. Then, social sharing and streaming algorithms kick in, and they can lock in that early lead and make it stick. Now, this is a fantastic theory, right? But the researchers behind this study didn't just leave it at that. Nope, they set out to prove it with a ton of data. And when I say a ton, I mean it. They analyzed the data from over 920,000 songs to see if this first mover advantage was a real, actual, measurable force in the music world. So here's how they did it. They pulled their success data, the exact number of plays, straight from Spotify. Then, for the innovation part, they used this amazing site called Every Noise at Once to get super detailed genre tags for each song. And they looked at 110 different genres in total. Okay, now this is where their method gets really, really smart. To make sure that early songs weren't just more popular for some other reason, they created these fake pseudo-genres out of totally random songs, which you can see on the right. These fake genres had the exact same timeline as the real ones, like the chill wave example over on the left. This let them isolate the one variable they cared about. Does being an early pioneer in a specific new sound actually give you a boost? And the results? Whoa, they were incredibly clear. See, each one of these blue dots is a real genre. That steady downward slope shows that the earlier a song came out in that genre's history, the more successful it was. You just don't see that strong, consistent pattern in the orange dots from the fake genres. The data absolutely proved the theory. So the takeaway was unmistakable. Being a pioneer, an innovator who helps invent a new sound, gives you this powerful, lasting advantage. And this wasn't a fluke. The effect was statistically significant in over 80% of all the genres they looked at. So let's bring this whole theory back down to earth and look at one of the key examples from the study itself. The researchers really zeroed in on a specific musical innovation from the mid-2010s, emo rap. And it wasn't just one thing, right? It was this brand new fusion of super vulnerable lyrics, modern trap beats, and rap flows. It was a whole new recipe. And one of the key first movers of this new sound was XXXTENTACION. He came up on SoundCloud after meeting his collaborator Ski Mask the Slump God in juvenile detention of all places. And he quickly became a defining voice of this new sound. I mean, his success was huge. His album Question hit #1 on the Billboard charts. He was a textbook example of a first mover. But the data that shows his success as an innovator, that only tells one part of a really, really disturbing story. Because while his music career was skyrocketing, his personal life was marked by extreme violence and escalating legal problems. This timeline, it shows a pretty shocking parallel. His breakthrough hit, Look at Me, blew up after a pattern of alleged domestic abuse had already begun, and his number one album came out after he was jailed on felony charges for witness tampering. In a really detailed profile by the Miami New Times, his former girlfriend, Geneva Ayla, described a pattern of what she called torturous abuse. And that same report included testimony from a witness who described hearing the alleged abuse, further detailing just how severe these accusations against him were. So, the data shows us a first mover, but the headlines show us a pattern of abuse. And this forces us to ask a much more complicated question about what success really means, especially today.
His friend, the rapper Denzel Curry, put it pretty bluntly. It suggests this strange paradox where the controversy around him didn't just not hurt his success, it might have actually fueled it. So yeah, the data says he was a first mover, but the headlines suggest his notoriety and his fame were completely tangled together.
Which really brings us to this final question. The whole SoundCloud era was defined by having no traditional gatekeepers. Labels weren't deciding who we heard. It was us, the listeners, and the algorithms. The science tells us that being first gives an artist a huge advantage. But in a world without those gatekeepers, that leaves a really critical question for us. What is our role as listeners in deciding who we choose to make a star?